Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tom Rivera, and welcome to our Oral History Project taping. Today is Saturday, February the 21st, and it's approximately 1:45 in the afternoon, and we're taping at my house, 23170 Vista Grande Way in Grand Terrace. And our guests this afternoon are two sisters. Let me introduce Dolores Galvez Crouter.
Yes.
Did I say it right?
Yes.
Okay, say
Yes,
it
you
for
did.
me.
Crouter.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And Miss Carol Galvez Salazar. And welcome both of you, and thank you so much for taking your time out on a Saturday afternoon to be with us to talk about how it was growing up in Colton.
Thank you
The
for
first thing that,
inviting us.
pardon?
Yeah. Thank you for inviting us.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm delighted that you're here. And you drove all the way from
Banning.
Banning, and you drove all the way from
San Diego.
San Diego, so we do appreciate
Okay.
you being with us this afternoon. Now, why don't we get started? Let me talk about your mom and dad. Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad. First of all, what are their names? What,
Catherine Gaitan Galvez
Was-
and Walter Guadalupe Galvez.
uh-huh. And when did they come to Colton?
Our mother was born here,
Okay.
as was her mother and her grandmother.
Uh-huh.
And my dad,
Before we go into your dad, tell me about your mom's family. You said your mom was born here in Colton, so was her mom and several members of the family. Tell us
And her
about your mom's family.
Mama was born here in Colton in June 25th, 1915. She was the only girl with three brothers. And she was born to Rose Smith Gaitan and Rudolfo Gaitan. Rudolfo was from Ciudad Lerdo in Durango, Mexico. And Grandma Rose was born in Colton
Mhm.
also. And her parents were Andres Gil Smith,
Uh-huh.
who is better known as Andrew Gill Smith,
Okay.
and Rosenda Aguayo. And she was born in 1863 in San Timoteo Canyon. And Andrew was born in Monterey in 1858.
California.
Monterey, California,
Uh-huh.
thank you.
In 1850. Now, when did he come to Colton? Because
In about 1883, and I just noticed that in 1883, in a blurb that my mom wrote for
Uh-huh.
Hazel's book.
Uh-huh.
So,
And now, were they related to any of the people that settled the Agua Masa colony?
they were not from New Mexico,
Right.
but Rosenda's parents, Loreto and Guadalupe, came up from Sahuaripa, Sonora, about probably 1848, 1849, and joined the colony at
Okay.
Agua Mansa.
Okay. Okay. So they were intricately part of the colony then.
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
as I'm finding out.
Because the church was established, the colony was established in 1842.
Mhm.
So they were just getting started. They were just getting. Anyway, your mom had quite a background, in a long history of being one of the Colton residents, original Colton residents.
My mom?
Yes.
She was born here. She loved Colton.
Grandma
Yeah.
did too.
And Grandma did too,
She
yeah.
was born here.
We were, this is home. I left in 1965 and it's
Uh-huh.
still home.
Uh-huh.
So,
Dolores, do you remember your grandma?
Of course.
yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about your grandma?
Well, my grandma was.
Her name was,
Oh, Rose.
okay.
So she was just plain grandma to me.
Uh-huh.
And
Where did
she
they
was
live?
a very, very strong woman.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry.
Where did they live?
In South Colton on N Street, East N. Grandma and Grandpa lived behind the Las Palomas grocery. There was an apartment, and they lived right there in the same building. It was
Uh-huh.
an apartment building, and they had the grocery store.
And the grocery
Yes.
store was located between 9th and 10th on the north side of N Street?
Not between Ninth and 10th. Well,
From the
I
tracks,
don't, from the tracks.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
whatever the
I
tracks
can't
were.
remember the name. It's been a long time since I lived in Colton.
Uh-huh.
But, and they lived in an apartment behind. So to visit them, we were at the store, and then there was property around it. So there was a lot. It was on a. There was a side lot beside the store.
Uh-huh.
And the big
And
house.
Grandpa did his own butchering. It was before supermarkets. So
And your grandpa's name was
Rodolfo.
Rodolfo Gaitan.
Yes.
And he did his own, everything that
Everything
needed to be done.
that a
to
grocery
get-
store requires.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are some of the commodities or things that he sold at the grocery store?
Well, I remember bins of mash and bins of feed for different things like chickens and bird stuff, and
Uh-huh.
and there was the butchering section. He did that himself.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm recalling during the war though. As a kid, we moved from my folks moved from Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
And when the war hit, my mom said, my brothers are going to war, they're volunteering, and we have to help my folks with the store, and he had a liquor store
And what year
on
was
Oak
that?
Street.
What year was that, Dolores?
1941 was when
Oh, okay.
the World War
42.
II,
Okay.
World
Yeah.
War II hit.
And his liquor store was in the corner of N and 7th Street?
Good,
Seventh and
I'm
O.
glad.
7th and O?
Seventh
Oh.
and O.
7th and
Oh.
O. 7th and O.
Oak Street. Uh-huh.
7th and O.
So they were separate and divided by the boulevard, which was 8th Street,
8th
which is
Street.
now La Cadena.
So your mom ran the grocery store, your dad ran the liquor store?
No, my grandpa Grandma ran the store. Mom helped. Sometimes she would, break them, but, and Grandpa ran the liquor store, but he also was at the grocery store when he had somebody to watch the liquor store.
They were busy
Yeah.
people.
They were busy people.
Very
yes.
busy people.
And at that time, he had one leg that was severed from the accident at the Cement Mountain.
Oh, tell me about the accident. What happened?
Well, that was
Your
way-
dad- your grandpa-
my
Grandpa.
grandfather.
Was working at Polish
Gaitan.
Cement?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
The way I recall the story, it could have some variations maybe,
Uh-huh.
but the way I recall was that he was in charge of the
Blasting.
blasting, yeah,
Dynamite.
for the cement blasting, and a charge did not go off.
Ah,
I guess it was TNT. I don't know what it was,
Uh-huh.
what they used, but it did not go off. So he went up there to check on it, and it went off.
ah.
So he was in a very bad accident there.
And how old was he,
And-
Dolores, when
Oh,
the
I
accident
don't know. Do
happened?
you happen to have that, Carol?
I know the date. It was August 12th, 1936.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so I was
And-
3 years old then.
Ah,
And
okay.
Grandpa was born, he had to have been
Yeah.
at least 40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
She's got all the dates.
that's okay, but we'll still rely on you to give us some
Yes.
information.
I
You know,
have, it was wonderful being in the store with both of them because a lot of people, well, they kept it kind of busy.
uh-huh,
Mhm.
uh-huh,
Very
And
busy.
I think it was there that I just loved watching people.
uh-huh.
And he let me wait on the penny candy thing,
Yes.
It wasn't just penny candy. They got like 5 to 10 pieces for a penny even,
Uh-huh.
It was really, really fun. And when he saw me sneak a bubble gum, he would let me get just so far, and then he'd take his crutch and go boom right on my little bottom.
As
So then
you're-
I had to turn around and say, "Thank you, Grandpa."
As you walk in the store, what was located on the left-hand side of the store when you walked in?
The main counter.
Okay, and
The
then,
main counter there was glass, there was some kind of display, I don't remember
That
exactly.
wasn't the butcher.
Well, there was, yeah, probably the
Counter.
butcher area.
The butcher with the dill pickles and the
I wish
pickled
I
pig's
had-
feet and,
No,
on top.
those were at the liquor store.
no.
They were in the store too. I don't remember them. I remember the
They were on the butcher
great
counter.
big jars of the pickles and pig's feet
uh-huh,
at
That was next to the
liquor
counter.
store.
Okay, at the liquor store.
But I wasn't allowed to hang around there very long.
Yeah.
You know.
But getting back to the grocery
The
store.
grocery store.
On the left-hand side was
And
the
then they
counter.
had a cash register, and they
Okay.
had the little books for credit.
Yeah.
Everybody charged things, and they would send their kids to pick up whatever. And they would say, do you have your mother's permission or your dad's permission? Yes, you know, and then they would write down what it is that they had to buy and so on.
And were they, I'm sure they were regular customers, but did they
Yes.
pay on time?
Well, I really don't know. When my grandfather passed away, my mom had to go through a lot of things that looked like they were pawned. So I think he loaned money or took payment with some
Uh-huh.
things like that. And they were all stored, and I don't believe that they were marked with people's names or anything, so
Uh-huh.
it must have been something that was traded.
Yeah.
But they were still kept separately.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So he was a generous person.
Yes,
Yeah, and a good business person.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And past the counter where you had the meat display, what followed on the back wall, or on the right hand side?
The door to the apartment was
I-
in the back.
Yeah, it was in the apartment was in the back. You had to go clear through the store to get to the apartment, and that was usually closed off pretty well.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember much about the apartment except the kitchen, because I hung around Grandma.
And Grandma had a bird.
And she had a bird, yeah.
She always had a bird.
And
Then
there were
wh-
lots of pigeons outside around under the trees
La
too.
Paloma.
Yeah, La Paloma, yes,
Mhm.
lots
The
of
Paloma Barrio.
yes. But I don't remember a whole lot on the wall. I'll tell you why. When I was in that store, I was gazing at my grandfather's green eyes,
Uh-huh.
and always wondering how he could get around on the crutches so well. So I didn't look around on the walls much. You know, I was fascinated with my grandpa and grandma.
Well, you know, I kind of mentioned that because I thought whatever was sold at the store was displayed on counters, you know, against the wall.
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
remember.
They probably had shelves and stuff. I
Yeah.
remember shelves of canned goods and
Yeah.
things, but there was a lot on the right-hand side more. I think the left-hand side was more of the meat area and the cash register area.
Okay.
And that's about all.
Mostly we played outside.
We played
in that
outside a
huge
lot.
lot
On
between the
entry?
house and the
Yeah,
store.
when
Well,
we-
because our cousins lived in the back, Uncle Al, and
I-
did they live close
No,
by?
they lived on another street, yeah.
Yeah,
about a
but
block
they
away.
were always
Uh-huh.
there.
But,
Yeah.
well, let me tell you, when we first moved from Los Angeles, we could only find a rental. We lived on La Cadena for a while, and until they became, next door to the lot next to the store was a house that was for sale, and my folks bought that one.
Okay.
So I don't remember what age I was there, but probably around,
I was about 3. So you were about 8.
oh yeah, I started fourth grade in Colton
Oh, what school did you go to?
at Grant School.
Grant School that was
Yes.
near the high school.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I
the old
wrote-
Grant.
The old Grant
I-
School.
On the hill.
I wrote something here about Grant School, but
Okay.
I
Can
don't
I
know
have
if
a
you're
little
ready for
story
that.
about
Go ahead.
the grocery store?
Yes.
We weren't allowed, I wasn't allowed, I was only about 3,
Right.
but we didn't have free reign to go in and out of the store anytime we wanted because they were working.
Right.
And people thought we could get all the candy we wanted. We couldn't.
couldn't?
There
And
was
my
that-
best memory, when
You
you
had to earn it.
when you asked what was sold at the grocery store, Hershey bars immediately came to mind because I was promised a Hershey bar if I didn't cry when Montijo, what was her name, down the street?
Rosie Montijo.
Rosie Montijo came over to pierce my ears. They sat me on a
That's right.
stool in the grocery store and put the red thread through there, and I
Me
didn't
too.
cry because I wanted that Hershey bar, really. But that's my grocery store.
That had to be during the war, then, I mean, yeah.
That was-
during- well,
But you
after
know,
the
Carol, I
uncles were
forgot
gone.
about that custom,
Oh, yeah.
piercing the ears.
Yes.
Oh, and then
How
you
old
had
were
to
you?
keep turning the string.
How old
Yeah.
were you?
I was about 3,
Uh-huh,
so 3 and a half.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh. Now,
So-
tell me about your grandpa. What was his name?
Rodolfo
Rodolfo.
Gaitan.
Gaitan.
She's saying Rudolfo, I'm saying Rodolfo because that's what they called him, Rodolfo.
Rodolfo. And where was he from?
It,
Ciudad Lerdo, Durango.
Uh-huh.
And he came up, I don't know what year exactly, but he went back to bring his sister back, Luisa Gaitan, who became Luisa Gaitan Serrano,
Mm-hmm.
and raised a family. She raised a family in Colton.
Uh-huh.
But he came back to Colton.
Uh-huh.
And,
Did he immediately start working at the cement plant?
I don't know. Probably because as I go through the census, most everyone worked at the cement plant.
Yes.
Or the railroad, or the
Right. Or picked oranges, La Volucha.
yeah. They were never pickers. They were never in the fields.
Uh-huh.
So I think he was always with the cement plant,
Uh-huh.
as far as I know.
and I remember him as a very bright man. My grandmother too.
Uh-huh.
They were
Oh,
very, very
Grandma,
smart.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what brought them to? What brought your father to Colton? Your grandfather to Colton?
I don't know.
Don't know.
You should have said my grandmother.
Oh.
Well, he met her there, and
Oh, I should have
he,
brought the frame.
he was a handsome man.
Uh-huh.
Like she said, green-eyed,
Yes.
wavy hair,
Yes.
and he raised. All my uncles were tall and handsome.
Uh-huh.
And my mom was pretty.
Are you related to the ex-mayor of Colton,
Which one?
Gaitan?
Yeah, he's our first cousin.
Okay, I forget his first name.
Carl.
Carl
His father,
Gaitan.
his dad was my mom's older brother.
Mm-hmm.
She had two older brothers and one younger brother.
Uh-huh.
So
And what was his name? What was
Rudy.
Rudy?
He was named for his dad.
Rudy, because Rudy used to work in construction with my dad.
Yes.
They were very good friends.
Mhm.
They were very
And
good
he
friends.
had the green eyes.
Yes, he
and-
did.
yeah.
Yes, he did.
Just a quick question. How did your grandfather spell his last name?
Well, it depends on Gaitan and Gaytan. In the same year, it'll be
Yeah.
both different ways.
And then there is Gayton, because one of my cousins felt like that's how we said it. So he would say Gayton in school. So he would write it with an O-N. So it's got a lot of
But
variations.
Grandpa used both.
But
both spellings.
the one that I always saw him write was Gaytan.
Thank you.
And then cousin Rudy Serrano, when he was looking up genealogy and things, he said he found that the original spelling was in Spain with a Y. So, I don't know.
So it would be Gay,
Mhm.
Tan.
So, yes,
But
but
he,
it's.
Rudy uses Gaitan
he
for his
uses
first
GAI,
name.
because that's
middle
how,
name.
that's
Yeah.
how a lot of people wrote it here.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he said where that came from, but I don't remember what it was.
In fact, Rudy Serrano was named for our grandpa,
For Grandpa too.
for his Theo.
Yeah.
We're talking about, we shifted over to the relatives that
Yeah.
you have
Yes,
in Colton.
right, we did.
And tell me
There-
about
we've
your
got
relatives. Now that
lots
you,
of
now that you
them.
mention your relatives, tell me about
Well,
your relatives.
Do
Where
you
do we
still,
begin?
Do you
Yes.
still want to be on Grandpa's side or on Grandma's side?
Let's
of it?
see.
We've got,
Let's start with Grandpa's side.
well,
You mentioned Rudy. Rudy said,
his,
I don't know
his only
That was
His
his
only
only sibling that we know of.
Uh-huh.
And
was Luisa.
Luisa came and married Tirso Serrano. They lived up north for a while. Some of the kids were born up north, and I don't remember where. But
Uh-huh.
then they settled in Colton, and they all went to Colton High School.
Okay.
Tirso, Rudy, Eddie, Molly, Chavela, and Freddie. I'm probably missing someone. But,
Amalia, did you say?
Molly, yeah.
Well, you know, for this project.
And they helped each other through college. All of
Yeah.
them, the two older ones, Eddie and Amalia, they helped
didn't go.
each other. I mean, the younger ones,
Yeah.
to all of them go through college. So the first two didn't, but they worked, and
Uh-huh.
then they helped the others as they worked and went
Yeah.
and got their education.
That was Tirso
And Rudy.
And Rudy.
Mhm.
Tirso
Yeah.
Jr. and Rudy and
Chavela and Freddie didn't go.
Chavela and Freddie
No, they
didn't
didn't
go.
go.
They didn't go.
Well, you know, when as we started the project, I called Rudy.
Yeah, good.
I called Rudy up in Fresno
Mhm.
and said, Rudy, you got me excited with the three monograms that you put together.
Mhm.
So I'm going to take off from where you started, and that's how we started the project. Incidentally, our committee members are Mr. Frank Acosta, who's a retired teacher from Colton Junior High School.
Taught my
who's behind the
kids.
camera, and he taught your daughter.
My
Okay.
son too, and it was all of them.
Just Carmela and Philip.
And Philip? Okay.
Yeah, and Carmela is here, kind of being one part of the audience. And then the other member of our committee is Mr. Henry Vasquez. And anyway, Henry and Frank got the idea that we should do this project many, many years ago.
May
So
I
here we are
mention
today.
something here
Yes,
because
go
I'm
ahead.
very proud of it. I took piano lessons from his grandma. Is it your grandma? Yeah.
Yes.
Margarita Gomez. And I was very happy. I didn't know how well she was teaching me until I got to Valley College and was a music major. And I realized she taught me in the Spanish language, and I was ahead of most people in my class in theory. She was very
Nice.
good. a
How
very
old were
good
you when you
teacher.
were taking lessons?
In middle school somewhere, probably seventh and eighth grade.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
See, Henry?
Nice.
You are related to everybody.
Yeah.
It just radiates out.
Well, they lived around the corner from the store.
Oh, that's
So
right.
that was easy.
That was perfect, yeah. Now tell us about your mom's relatives in Colton. Well,
How much
everybody
time
but
do we?
Say half of Old Colton, not now, but half
By the
of.
Yeah,
time I
no.
got to high school,
Yeah.
my freshman year, it was like, that's a cousin, that's a cousin, that's a cousin.
Yeah. Can we name a few
First,
last names?
let's see, there's, I think of the Aguayos, of course, the Aguayo family.
We interviewed Frank Aguayo
Mhm.
just a couple of weeks ago.
Mhm. His first cousin is Lucia Arias, and she was graduated in '54. Very
Louis-
pretty redhead with freckles.
Yeah, Louis, before that, he
Oh,
graduated. the
Louis
year
graduated
before
with
I
her,
did.
but the Arias family, some of the Espinosas were
Well,
always pointed out as
Aguayo.
distant cousins.
There's Aguayo.
Martinez,
Martinez.
okay, grandma's siblings. Aunt Nana and Aunt Maggie never got married.
They were Smith.
Okay,
Smith, you don't forget the Smiths.
no. Okay, Aunt Maggie and Aunt Nana did not get married. So, of course, grandma's
And their last
Offs-
name was?
Smith.
Okay.
Luisa Smith Velarde, and Aunt Maggie was a spinster. So, let's see, my uncle's, what other sister got married? Her sister Josephine married Martinez, and Martinez's ancestor was one of the original settlers from New Mexico. So they're from that line,
From
but
that
they're
line,
also our
okay.
cousins. Yeah,
Okay.
all the Martinezes. Who else? Garcia, Virginia Smith married Garcia, and there was Pancho,
That's right.
Abe, and
The red-haired
Eleanor.
side of the family.
Nini, yeah, they were all redhead.
They were all redhead.
Freckles.
Well, part of the Arias were too. They were redhead.
Yeah.
That went down through that
I
line.
went to school with Gloria Arias.
She was,
Is your
was,
cousin?
Yes, right.
Lucia's sister.
Lucia's
Mhm.
sister, yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
Yeah, uh-huh.
And then all our Smith cousins, there were,
a lot of them. There
people
were-
wonder who that dark Smith is on
Yeah.
out on the ball field, and they're
Yeah,
cousins.
Theo Hueto's family. He had a big. How many are in Theo Hueto's family?
I think he had 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that.
Our great uncle. Our great
Yeah.
uncle.
Antonio Smith. And then there was my Uncle Johnny Smith and my Uncle Frank Smith
Mhm.
and Joseph Leonard Smith, who raised his family in San Diego.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. So, you're related to the Awamansa colony in one way or another?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Whether it's Espinosa or Martinez or there's another name. Some of the Trujillos. When they speak of the
That's
Trujillo adobe
Yeah.
in Riverside that they're
Yes.
trying to restore, Eloisa was the matriarch. Eloisa raised her family in that adobe. Eloisa's grandmother was our great-grandmother's sister. So Eloisa was the eldest and Rosenda was the youngest
Mhm.
of the Ohio girls. And we are related through the Trujillos and the Ruby Dews and the Espinosas marrying the Aguayo women. So that's why I'm trying to document as much as I can, because you never see the name.
Mhm.
You never.
That's a comment that Frank
Yes,
made
yes.
also, that the Aguayo name should be included
Yes.
in the
Mhm.
history of Aguamansa.
Exactly.
He is adamant about that, and it's true.
And he's inspired me to get back into my mom's files that I inherited when she died, and get it going. And I'm doing it as much for my mom and for us as I am for Frank.
Mhm.
Because
And both our mom and dads were,
Yeah.
they were
Family.
both family oriented, and they would even scold other relatives for not visiting each other. I mean, that's how much they loved family.
Dolores, I was going to ask you, do you have any family reunions
Oh,
where you
we
get
do.
all the family members together?
only the Galvez side.
Yeah. Well, we've had
Well,
a few
they-
on the Gaitan side. Yeah. You worked on those with Junie. Gloria Gaitan.
Basically, it was
Yeah.
a YO umbrella.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And they're planning another one for this summer, but I
It's
have-
usually a picnic type,
Yeah.
so it's kind of informal.
So we only had
And
one
then
or two of
Carol
those.
usually has charge of the records for the reunions
I
and
have them
stuff,
all.
the records and the bank account.
Yeah,
So there have been family reunions
Oh,
then?
yes.
a couple.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, not too many.
And then you do talk about the families and the different relationships?
Well, if one can keep their attention, you try to. And
You know, a lot of it is catching up with each other's
yeah, there's so much
stories, too.
social
Uh-huh.
that for them to just sit down and pay attention is
There's a lot of
it's
interesting
difficult.
people that are doing interesting things.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned your mom. Your mom was quite a person.
She was.
She
Very smart.
very, and then also she
Wise.
wrote. She wrote,
Yes.
little stories about South Colton and about different people in South Colton. And how did she get started? Or do you have stories that she wrote about different things of?
Can I say something?
I do, but I think one of the things is there was no TV.
Yes.
So that when you visited
Uh-huh.
with your relatives. You would sit and talk, and the children weren't shooed away. If you sat and you were quiet, you could listen to everything.
My
that
favorite place
going
was
on.
behind the couch.
Yeah.
Because when they switched to Spanish, my ears would perk up and I wanted to listen to the what they were talking about that was so secret. They switched to Spanish, but I knew Spanish, so.
And
So
I
they
learned-
thought you didn't understand the language?
Well,
and
I
they
would, oh no, they knew I understood,
Uh-huh.
but I would hide behind the couch so I could hear the juicy parts.
And I learned by osmosis also so that later I could speak to my tios and tios.
Uh-huh.
Well, they speak to me in Spanish and I speak back in English, and we had great conversations,
Uh-huh.
but
Yeah,
I didn't practice speaking it until...
she wasn't as nosy as I was. Well,
No,
she was
I
younger.
was nosy. I listened. I stayed awake. Because Daddy would talk about his family, which went into Tombstone, Arizona, and I know you'll ask me about that later, but he went way back into Arizona Territory history.
Mhm.
So we always knew that, and into Sonora also, and we're still very much in touch with our first cousins in Sonora.
Hmm.
So we have
Hmm.
visited them several times.
Uh-huh.
So.
Uh-huh.
But Mama just always had a tremendous respect for her elders,
Yeah.
and we were taught that also.
But besides that, she was the go-to person to
Yeah.
help anybody with paperwork. Her cousins, her second cousins, her siblings, any of us, anybody who needed help filling out papers, she'd have the typewriter at the ready, and she would help them with anything they had to fill out, if there was anything, or if they had questions, because she was very serious about her vote. She would go to Valley College lectures about the politics and about the voting and all that, and then she would pass the news around to the families. So she was the go-to person to ask for things. There was no Google.
Uh-huh.
It was Grandma.
It
was Katie.
Katie. They called her
Katie.
Katie. Hey, Kate.
And she had the patience
Uh-huh.
to sit with anybody
Yes.
who had trouble understanding what
She
they were
was happy
reading. She
to
would
share.
explain it, and very wise woman.
Yeah.
Now, when did you start writing about people and things in South Colton? Because I understand that she provides some articles for Hazel Olson to include it in Hazel's book. When did you start doing
Hazel
that?
was her good friend, so they chatted a lot, and she just felt that the community needed to be recognized in Hazel's book about Colton.
Well, I'll tell you
Go
something
ahead.
that about that too, was that the book. Mom felt that the book was mostly things taken out of the Colton Courier papers and statistics, and she wanted to put real people's stories together with that. And also, she said many times, I remember, she would say, Colton Courier made lots of mistakes. They gave wrong dates, they spelled names wrong. So she was trying to correct things as well as put more humanity into Hazel's stories.
Uh-huh.
Because Hazel was more a
Was new.
documenter.
She was new to
not.
Colton.
She was not from Colton. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't
No,
know.
she
I
was
mean,
born-
And she
she
was not a
she was more
writer.
of a historian. Yeah. But my mom wanted things to be correct
Yeah,
as much
basically,
as it could be.
to be
Uh-huh.
correct.
But
She
when
was
when you quote
yeah.
from newspaper articles verbatim, then if they're wrong, they stay wrong in the book.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of what Mom was trying to deal with.
Well, I read some of her little stories that she provided for the newspaper, and I said, I'll be darned, I didn't know anybody at that time wrote about South Colton. How did she get interested in writing about South Colton? Do you know?
There was another friend that used to also, I can't remember her name, she called herself a friend of Mom's.
Gertrude Padilla.
No, I'm talking about Moy's sister, I think.
Oh, well, Jenny.
Flores?
Jenny,
Jenny
Flores.
Flores.
She wrote.
Uh-huh.
She wrote under the name of Blanca something. I can't remember.
Yes,
And she would
yes.
tell little stories also. So Mom wasn't the only one, and they would talk with each other too and,
Oh,
and
okay.
compare notes and stuff.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So yeah, but
And she interviewed her aunts and uncles.
Yeah.
She would sit and
Yes.
interview them, and I'm still finding
little notes.
notes
Yeah.
that I haven't come across for some reason. They don't appear until I need them, until I'm on that chapter.
Oh, so your mom interviewed family.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or she'd write something down. If she got a Christmas card and from Mary and was it Mary and Joseph, and their 4 kids were all listed with their ages, she'd tear off the bottom of that Christmas card and drop it in the either Gayton Smith or YO file.
Uh-huh.
And so she would have the names. It was just important to her
And
to document.
What happened to that documentation in those stories?
There's
How
a
many
4
file drawers do you
There's
have?
a 4-drawer file in
Four-drawer
my
file.
garage,
Okay.
Yes.
and I
She's still going through.
still go through it and still discovering.
Mhm.
For instance, about Grandpa's leg.
Oh yeah.
She's my go-to person because of our age difference. She's the oldest. I was number
We're
3.
5.5 years difference.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay,
was number
okay.
3. So I said, Lolita, I said, I'm trying to do this thing. When did Grandpa lose his leg? Do you remember? When you were little, did he have 2 legs or not? She said, I don't know. I said, well, I've written to the cement company and they say they don't know anything about it. So one day I pulled into my garage, left my purse in the car, just walked over to the 4-drawer cabinet, pulled the 2nd drawer open, and went to the Gayton file. First piece of paper I took out was a torn corner. It was already brown, and it said, my father, Rudolph Gayton, lost his leg August 12, 1936, in a blasting accident at the cement plant. I called my sister. I said, Mom just told me.
And all I remembered
Yeah.
all I could remember was visiting at St. Bernardine's. He was there
Oh,
for
really?
treatment, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's where we had that picture of Cousin Jerry and I and and Philip, little,
Oh,
my
in
brother
front of the
Philip.
hospital.
Our
That's
brother
right.
Philip.
Oh, okay, okay.
I didn't know that.
Now, when did you start working with Hazel? What's the last Hazel's?
Olson.
Olson.
Olson. When did you start working with her?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
You know,
Oh, their friendship
That's a long time.
formed from, was that the Alamanza Committee?
Probably the Alamanza
Or-
Committee, when that was formed.
Mama
probably.
was in, they were in Latin American Civic Club, but I don't remember Hazel before, at
No,
that
no,
time.
no,
Yeah.
Hazel came later.
yeah.
And she
I
was
don't
an
know
artist,
when that started,
you know.
yeah.
Um,
She had arthritis, Hazel Olson
Severe.
had severe arthritis, and she would paint, what do they call it, like in a very simple style? Or do they call it primitive? I don't know,
Yeah.
I forget.
Very crippled
I'm not an
hands.
artist, so
Yeah.
I don't know the names of types of art.
But
Do
they
you?
worked together for a long time.
They were
They-
friends, they were
Yeah.
They
good
were
friends.
friends,
Yeah.
yeah, and, yes.
When it came time when she ran for, Hazel ran for city councilwoman,
I don't know,
um,
I didn't live there then.
a husband of one of the other candidates came walking down the long sidewalk and asked Mom to, I won't mention names.
Yeah,
He asked Mom if he could put a sign, because we were on a busy corner,
Uh-huh.
Colton Avenue in Fairview, if he could put a sign for his wife out there who was already a council person. And Mom said, absolutely not, I don't like her politics. So then she, quick Hazel, we need a sign, so she plunked Hazel's sign out there. So, and of course, those two people never spoke to Mom again.
that's right.
And,
Yeah.
so, I'll let you guess who that was.
Yeah.
So where were we on the questions?
Well, no,
So-
you know, you pull out something.
I copied, Mom wrote interesting facts in 1920.
Okay.
And I think Hazel put it under 1920 because it started, Mom's memories and writing started there. And she goes into the local markets, the tortillerias that were there, the bakeries, who used to be active in Boy Scout work, where Garfield School was. She goes on. I don't know where she got.
Well, you know, I ran across those two pages, and when I looked at 1920, I said, wait a minute, Savas, they would have made Savas a
Robledo.
huge old guy, and some of the other thing, I said, no, I don't think that happened in 1920. I think it happened more in the 50s because Savas was with the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts in the 50s. So anyway, I kind of saw that and I said,
Yeah.
They put it in the.
I don't know why she did that.
They put it in she put it in 1920
Yeah.
and then in the 1950s.
Who was that, Mom?
Some of the
Yeah.
Hazel.
Hazel,
It started
That's-
out in the 20s and
Yeah.
then it morphed into
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And-
later years.
And also, your mom was a very good friend of Tula and
Oh,
Maria.
She went to school with them.
Well, tell me about that relationship.
Wow.
They
Tula,
would giggle. They would.
Oh, well, it was, they kept each other well informed about what was going on.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And even though my folks moved out of South Colton over to Colton Avenue, well, before that to F Street, to be close to the Grant School where we were going.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then to Colton Avenue. So, and Tula and her other sister.
Maria?
Maria.
Crouter and Manuel.
And yes, and they were all good friends, and they just kept, well, there was in the Mexican-American Civic Club.
Latin American
Latin
Civic
American
Club.
Latin
Civic
American
They were
Civic
all
Club.
together on that.
Oh,
I
okay,
get the ones,
okay.
I get the names of the clubs mixed up with the high school clubs too,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
high school we were Mexican-American.
They were also active, Padillas were active in La Asociación de Trabajadores Unidos.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a very active club in
Yeah.
South Colton.
Mhm.
And that was pretty well connected
And,
to the San Salvador Church
Yeah.
too.
And
Now tell me about getting back to Tula, Gertrude,
Oh, yeah.
and Maria, and your relationship with your mom. Was your mom active in the Catholic Church like they were?
No,
she'd
Yeah.
send us to catechism,
She'd send us
send us to mass.
Yeah.
yeah, we did our first communion and confirmations at San Salvador.
Oh, you
And
did?
then I used to sing at San Salvador for weddings and things. Oh, yeah. And with Margarita Gomez, she was also my accompanist when I soloed. That's right. And then her daughter-in-law was my accompanist in high school. Natalia Salazar married Tony Gomez. And she was my accompanist for the Mexican songs that I sang while I was in high school. Yes. Yes. So
Everybody-
see, you're well connected to your family over there, Gomez. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So that was the relationship. What about, was she also, did she work with them on the Fiestas Patrias?
Yes.
yes, very
Yes.
much.
Yeah.
Mom and Dad
Yeah,
both did.
Yeah. The Latin American Civic Club was
Yeah.
worked very hard. A lot of their fundraising, the dances that they would put on and everything, were for raising money for the Fiestas Patrias.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I understand you were the queen in 52.
Was that the year? Yeah.
1952, you
Yes,
were the
it
queen
was-
of the
Yes.
Fiestas
Of
Patrias.
Fiestas Patrias, yes. Well,
Well-
the year before, my cousin Lucia Arias was
Was
queen of the Fiestas Patrias. And
Now, did Lucia marry David Casca?
Yes.
yes, she
Okay,
was
got
married
it.
to him a
Okay,
few
got
years
it.
ago.
Okay.
And she's married to Chavez now.
Tutti
Yeah.
Chavez, Art Chavez.
Art Chavez, he was
Chavez.
in
He was from
my class.
He's probably in your class,
My
yeah.
class.
But he's
But-
older than I am, but he's in your class. Yeah.
You're a young one then, right?
Yes.
No, it's just that the Mexican kids were always older than the Anglo classmates
Yes.
in their
Sometimes,
classes.
sometimes,
So,
yeah.
yeah, many of them were. So,
I never noticed that.
yeah. Many of my classmates were a year or two older. I remember Nadine was about 3 years older. Nadine Rodriguez.
I don't know, because kindergarten
was-
wasn't required then. So I think a lot of times, and the Catholic school did not have a kindergarten, and that was why you ended up going to public school too. Well, I went to public school too.
No,
but-
they had a kindergarten at St. Bernardine's.
Oh, did they? When
Mama,
you were little?
Mama sent me in a taxi to San Bernardino.
Oh,
They
okay.
closed the iron gates on me, and
Oh.
after a week, she pulled me out. She says, "Nope, they say you cry every day when those gates close in front of you, so you don't need kindergarten." So I never went to kindergarten. I stayed
I
home.
remember
and,
now you
Yeah.
said that.
I
Yeah.
said, and I didn't. I knew how to read already. So.
Yeah.
But Dolores, tell us about your
What?
running for queen
Uh-huh.
and getting elected and
Well,
all the activities that went with it.
Well, I have to back up a little bit
Okay.
because, see, I went from piano to voice. I started taking voice with Miss Brooks, who was a very long-time Colton High School teacher, and Miss Pesquera was the Spanish teacher. I was very, I always took music and Spanish, and I had 4 majors going. But anyway, I was a performance major at Valley College, but I wasn't at Valley College yet when I ran for Queen. But I was taking Spanish dance and voice. So I was a performer. And when, I think it was Pascual Oliva was one of the active people in there, and he kind of talked me into, and my folks, into telling me to run, because this was fundraising.
Yes.
And each vote cost, I think, a penny,
I
or,
think I thought it was $1.
oh, no, I think it was penny votes. Yeah, it might have been more later,
Yes.
but I can't remember exactly. But, and then
Yeah, a
Lucia,
penny.
he said, I'll have your cousin Lucia tell you a little bit more about it, and so she did. She told me what you had to do, and of course that meant you had to go to ballroom dances and sell votes, and I loved ballroom dancing. I loved Latin dancing, and that was when the cha-cha first came in, the cha-cha. And before that, the mambo was real big stuff at the Valley Ballroom. Before that, it was the Urbita Ballroom. Then it got named to the Valley Ballroom. And then now it's the shopping center.
Inland Shopping Center.
Yeah, Inland Shopping Center.
Shame.
Too bad, because we had
Yeah.
more fun at the ballroom.
Right.
All I had to do was be careful not to take any drinks from anybody, because my uncles warned me about that. So my folks
Even
would
then.
take me. They loved dancing, and my uncles would be there. So I'd have family every time I was there, and they were all helping me sell votes too.
Okay.
And then one of the things that helped me a lot was because I was a dancer. Danny Landeros from the radio station
From
said,
Redlands.
yes, he was
Okay.
from Redlands. He was a friend of my uncle Pete and a friend of my folks,
Pete, last name?
Gaitan.
Okay.
And he said, Dolores, you're a dancer. I'm going to have you be a judge for the mambo contest, okay? Oh, great. You know, I had more fun doing that. So every time there was, I think they had them on a Saturday night or a Friday, I'm not sure. They had them fairly often. And I didn't realize that people were going to come up and buy votes from me when I was a judge. But I think it helped me a lot.
Well, not only
You know,
that.
it wasn't on beauty. It
Of the,
was on,
of the 5 girls, you got 75,000 votes.
I know.
Oh,
and,
really?
and the
Yeah.
next one got 40,000 votes.
Really?
Sophie
I never knew.
Felix.
You didn't know my dad.
yes, Dad was quite a salesman.
People in
Yeah.
Riverside were buying tickets
Yeah.
because my dad, through his brother, was connected to the Espinosa family in
Yes.
La Placita in Riverside. So every time we'd go to a dance, an anniversary, a
It-
birthday over there,
Everything.
boy,
Yeah.
that
My dad.
book of tickets came out and Daddy hit them all.
Yeah.
And so
So
he was
it
very
was-
amiable man.
Well, we had a lot
so-
of relatives
Uh-huh.
too, you
Yeah.
know, and relatives will help you when you're doing something like that.
And then you got elected queen, and then tell us about what happened after you were the queen. What did you have to do?
Well, they built one of the most beautiful floats for that year. It was a turning. I even have some snapshots with me
Oh,
that
do
I
you?
found. I'm going through stuff, but anyway, it was a very nice float that had a moving part, and the queen sat in this circle, and the other girls were right there, and it was a beautiful. Everybody dressed beautifully. It was a really fun time. The parades were all very ornate. The
Uh-huh.
decorated cars, the caballeros on their horses, and just everything was very nice then.
Who were the princes? Do you remember who the princes were?
Sally Ortega was one of them, and let me
Sally
look.
Jauregui,
Yeah.
Rachel
Jauregui-
Carrasco,
Rachel Carrasco, and
because she lived across from the
and
market.
then
Yes.
On East End.
and then oh gosh, I don't know if I can tell who some of them are. No, these are really. Oh, and that was the following year. No, who is what is this girl's name? Do you remember? Because I think she was in your age group. Yeah, Sally Ortega is on that picture.
How about Sophie Felix? Was she?
Sophie
That's
Felix.
Sophie.
That must be
That's
her.
Sophie.
Yeah, I couldn't remember her name. I've got to write it down. Yeah, and so it was very nice.
Uh-huh.
And
So you rode in the parade, and what was the parade route?
Oh, it went down 8th Street.
8th Street.
Uh-huh.
And it was still 8th Street, which is now La Cadena.
Uh-huh. It started.
And I
where
think
did
it just
start?
started at one end of town.
Fleming
And
Park?
Fleming, yeah, Fleming
I think
Park.
Fleming Park.
Yeah, that was about it.
Into South Colton, to
South
the
Colton.
Fiesta grounds.
And where was it? Where were the Fiesta grounds located?
In South Colton at
8th and N.
8th and N.
8th and N Street.
It was a big empty
Big.
lot, and now there's a liquor
Yeah.
store
There's
or market.
houses there
A
too.
market. A market.
Yeah.
El Sombrero Market, they call it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's behind the Sombrero restaurant. Yeah.
Oh yeah, now that grew
Yeah.
too. The Sombrero restaurant
Sombrero was
is
on
several
7th
buildings
Street.
put
Right.
together.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it was a smaller building.
So you had a stage or?
Oh yeah, they had a stage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And
and it would
street
start
dances.
on the 15th.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The grito was on the 15th, midnight, and so on. Yeah. it was-
September the 15th?
Mhm.
Okay.
It was always a two-night,
Uh-huh.
big two-night affair.
Uh-huh. And,
Harry Shepard crowned me, I think it was.
Uh-huh.
He was a congressman. Yeah.
and besides the activities and the speeches at the platform, was there a dance?
Oh yes. Dance and food and games, all kinds of things. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
A street dance.
Street dance.
Oh,
Yes.
so they would close off the street?
Yes.
Okay.
They'd close off N Street.
Mhm.
And there was always a band. We're talking about these ballroom dances
Live
and the
music.
street dances.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There were no DJs then.
Right.
We always had live music.
Live
Uh-huh.
music.
So,
Uh-huh. And the street was closed off between 7th and 8th Street?
yes.
Probably, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
And all alleys in between.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
this-
always the food was so good.
Uh-huh.
You remember the
I
food?
do remember.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
That was her.
Yeah. and it
Yeah,
was
and
all
you were
very.
crowned by
Oh yes, that's the one.
Harry Shepherd.
Harry Shepherd.
Now, who was Harry Shepherd?
A congressman.
Long time congressman.
Uh-huh.
And later, when I
Kept Norton
married,
Air Base open.
later when I married Van Crouter, we were both divorced, and I married him. He told me that he used to fly Harry Shepherd back and forth to wherever he had to go from Colton or
What, was
San
your
Bernardino.
husband a Colton boy?
No, he lived in San Bernardino first before, well, LA and then San Bernardino and then
Uh-huh.
Colton.
Uh-huh.
He was very active in the Immaculate Conception Church building.
Is that where you met?
And the Knights of Columbus, yes, that's where we knew
Uh-huh.
our families each.
But he was from Nebraska, right?
He was from Nebraska, but
Uh-huh.
when he left Nebraska, he went to Los Angeles and worked
Okay.
in the movie theaters and stuff over there.
And when did you marry? What year did you marry?
1983, we were both divorced,
Uh-huh.
and we married, and yes.
Any children?
No, just my Acosta children from my first marriage. No,
Yeah.
no, he and I, no, we married later in life.
Okay. And from your first marriage,
My first marriage was with Acosta,
Phil.
David Acosta.
uh-huh. And did you have any children?
From San Bernardino.
Yes, Carmel, who is over here on the couch. And
Carmel.
Carmel Acosta. She is Dr. Carmel Acosta Cooper.
And she went got her doctorate degree from Harvard.
Yes, she did.
Uh-huh.
Mhm. Santa Barbara first, and then UC Santa Barbara first, and then Harvard. Yep. And Valley College before that. And she recommends everybody go to a community college first, right?
Any other kids?
Yes. Philip Walter Acosta, he was named after both grandfathers.
Uh-huh.
His grandfather Felipe Acosta and my dad Walter Guadalupe Galvez. And then Gerald Acosta, named after our first cousin who died in an accident,
16 years old.
16 years old when we were 16. Gerald, he was named after Gerald Gaitan. Anyway, my son Gerald Acosta, and then Vince Acosta, my son that sang, and a lot of people will remember him in school productions, but he was also in California Boys Choir in Los Angeles.
Ah.
And he died at the age of 30. And then there's Florence Vida Acosta. She works for the post office. And those are my 5. I think I named them all.
Yeah, you did.
Did a good job. Now tell me about Padua Hills. You were a
Oh.
singer and a dancer
Yes,
and
yes. Well, as I say, I majored in all that. So I was lucky enough I was still connected to the dance school. I took dance with Vera Lynn. She was very, very good teacher in that her students were allowed to blossom. She would teach and teach and teach, and then we were allowed to go find our jobs. And so Powder Hills wasn't my first job. I was a telephone operator to begin with, right out of high school, before I went to college, to Valley. But I found out I had claustrophobia. I couldn't be a telephone operator. You had to be right there to the board, and I couldn't take it. So went to college and continued my journalism and dance and, performing major and Spanish. So later on, when I was working at Harris Company, that was one of my jobs. In advertising, I was writing advertising material and stuff for Harris Company with a group of other people. And I auditioned. I had friends who had been working there before, Carmen and Bill Nieto. They met when they were up Padua. So anyway, they lived in Colton, and they said, let us take you to see about an audition because, you're doing your Spanish dancing. I was performing all over the place in groups that were connected to the radio station. We called it roadshow groups.
Uh-huh.
And we would sort of get paid, just the money was divided among the 5 or 6 performers in the group. So it was being it was keeping up the performing, and the dance school was very active in doing programs like the Redlands Bowl and all that. So, and I did have to take ballet for that, which I didn't really like, but, so Padua Hills, they took, Carmen and Bill took me to the audition, but the first thing I told them is, I will not do waitressing. I said, my mom never let me take up waitressing because she said, you have more knowledge than that, and by waitressing you will get used to tips, and I don't want you stuck in that kind of job. So I told them that, and because everybody had another job there, it was a theater, dining room, and performance venue there.
And then you debuted with Mi Pueblito.
Probably, I can't remember what my first
Mi
play was.
Pueblito.
Mi Pueblito, yeah. And, oh yeah, I had a lead in that one, I think.
Yes.
Yes. The stage manager and I, see, we all had other jobs. So we two who were the leads then, the stage manager was the male lead, romantic lead, I guess, because there were other leads in it, but we were the romantic leads. And I had the lead, and at my other job at Padua Hills, I could relieve the switchboard, so I was switchboard relief, and also I was PR, publicity. I would interview people who were waiting for the dining room, and they only served 2 lunch times, you had to have reservations, and dinner, they only served 2 dinner times. And it was different on Sundays, but anyway.
And the theme was Spanish entertainment and Spanish plays.
Both Mexican and Spanish.
Right.
Mexican theater, they called it.
Mexican, the theater was every other play. The the plays ran about 6 to 8 weeks. Every other play was in English, and it would be early California. Every other play, and there were different stories. They were written by different people. The plays in Spanish were Mexican, and sometimes they involved the Mexican native peoples and their customs. So, and costumes aplenty. They had a wardrobe department. We never had to furnish our own costumes. So they were all made for us at our measurements, even the dining room costumes. We had cotton frocks. The women had cotton frocks that were especially, and they were on the style of early California. So the dining room was a separate thing. There were some dining room people who did not participate in the plays. But, and the plays, it was a company. Nobody was a big star of all the plays.
Okay.
It was a company, yeah.
And how
that was
long
the
did you
best
do
thing.
that for?
A year and a half.
So it was a good experience.
Yes. It
Wonderful
was,
experience.
yeah. And it was very enjoyable. I learned a lot. And I also used my journalism. I used 3 of my majors. Well, yeah, journalism, Spanish, and performing.
Very good.
So that was
As
good.
a student of Vera Lynn, did you ever have occasion to perform at the Orange Show?
Yes,
Yeah.
many times.
And Redlands Bowl.
I'll never forget. One of them was a very important performance, and I was going to dance my solo of Malagueña for the first time at the Orange Show. And I was working I was working for the phone company then, and I called in sick so that I could perform. And guess what? The very next day I was down with the flu.
Mhm.
So I never tried that again.
And Carol, your activities. Tell us about your family. How many how many children do you have?
Well, at the Valley Ballroom, I met this tall, handsome young man, Gilbert Salazar Jr.
Okay.
From San Bernardino,
Uh-huh.
from Meadowbrook area.
Okay.
And we danced every date to the big bands that would come to town. We dated for 2 years. He was in the Navy, and I said I wouldn't marry him until he got out and got a job.
Yeah, we
So
both did.
that's how stable Mom made us.
Yes, yes.
How
I had the same
controlled,
rule.
Yeah. So we were married in May of 1959, and married at Immaculate Conception in Colton, where I made my first communion and my
Uh-huh.
confirmation. I made my first communion before it was a church where it is. It was
Mhm.
in a storefront across from Valley College.
Mhm.
And then they built the church on 8th and Olive.
Olive,
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah. But we were married there. We bought after renting for a little bit, we bought our first home in Colton, off Colton Avenue and Florence Avenue. And we had a son, Victor, April 1st, 1960. And we were told that birthday couldn't happen to a better couple, so I had my April Fool's baby. And he worked for Norton at the time. I remember we were just married, and he had taken the federal tests to start working there. And he worked in a family-owned company, Wright Sheet Metal, and he knew he wasn't going to go anywhere there, and he didn't like the labor, working with his hands like that. So he applied at Norton, and we got a letter. And he said, "You will please report on such and such a date at a certain building at Norton Air Base. You will be working in data processing." 1959. He looked at me and says, "What's data processing?" And I said, "I don't know, but I think it's clean work." So he went, and he just could not believe that he would have to wear a white shirt every day and a necktie. It was really hard for him, the way he was raised, to get used to that. His dad worked for the railroad. His brothers-in-law, if they worked at Kaiser or railroad. So here he was having to dress up like he thought a lawyer or a doctor would. He didn't know everyday people could do this also. So it was a really eye-opener for him. And he stayed in that field for 32 years. And then they added his service, 4 years Navy time to that. So when he retired in 1991, he had 36 years of government service. And we had Victor. He worked at Norton, and then we moved to Long Beach because Norton was closing up. So then we were in Long Beach 8 years, and then Long Beach Naval Shipyard was going to close up. So we moved. He found a job in San Diego. And in the meantime, while we were in Long Beach, we adopted a second son, David. And so I have the 2 sons, and now I have 2 grandchildren.
Oh, congratulations.
So, thank
How old
you.
are they?
Christina is 20, Christina Salazar, and Michael is 17 and a half. So
Tell him where he's headed.
Michael is on his way to Ohio State University as he's a nationally ranked swimmer,
Okay.
and specialty the butterfly.
Well, you
So
mentioned his competition in San Diego.
he's the top right now. He is pretty much, he's in the top 3, if not the number 1. And the newspaper just got in touch with him that he's going to be their featured swimmer when the season opens next month. So they've interviewed him for a big article.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It was a
But
big...
he's been in the top 10 for his age group nationwide almost every year, because they go by age and stroke. So, but yeah, my husband died. He had cancer, and he died in June 24th, 1995, and is buried at Hermosa,
Okay.
where I will be one of these days. And
Me too.
yeah,
Me too.
I already have my name there. So it's close to my parents and my great-grandparents. So, then in 2001, my sister and I, who had never traveled together, took off to,
Not since we were little, anyway.
not since we were little, well, alone, yeah, took off for Europe for 3 weeks. And we were in Paris, and then in the south of France, and back to Paris. And the last 2 hours of the end of the 3 weeks, we boarded a shuttle bus, and the next hotel stop for the shuttle to go back to the airport was this gentleman from Monterey, California, boarded, and we talked for those 2 hours. Mostly she talked to him, but
I was sitting between. I was
Yeah.
sitting in the middle, and I remember saying to him,
my sister's a widow.
Well, I said,
He was a widower. After finding out he was a widower.
well, no,
Your sister was l'alcahueta, huh?
She was married
no,
to me.
he said, the first thing he said was, he noticed that there was a couple at the back of the little bus, and they were speaking an Asian language, and he said, I hope you two ladies speak English, because he said, I'm rather upset. My daughter is going in for a major surgery, and I'm rushing home. And he said, I need to tell a few jokes to relax a little bit. Do you mind? And we said, oh, no, we're fine. And then he told one joke, and then I said, oh, we didn't introduce ourselves. I'm married lady Dolores, and she's widow lady Carol. And boy, he glommed onto that widow lady thing.
And when did you marry him, Carol?
2 years later,
2 years
almost
later.
exactly.
And you know, there's it's a wonderful relationship because he says, you can keep your name Salazar. Tell
Oh,
us
yes.
about.
A week before the wedding, in May of 2003, he came over, he was standing in the kitchen, and he said, you know, you probably want to keep the name Salazar. And I looked at him, I hadn't even entered my mind, and I, okay, and he said, you've been Salazar for over 40 years. Your kids and your grandkids are Salazar. And your house is in your, everything's Salazar. And I looked at him and I said, you're right. Okay. And that's the way it is.
Uh-huh.
Now when he answers the phone and they ask for Mr. Salazar, he'll say, yes. So he jokes that maybe he should change his name. But I said, no, he is too white, too English.
You didn't
to-
say his last name, though.
Oh, his name, Paul Grisham.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, when we go back to Monterey, he helps me with research for my great-grandfather,
Uh-huh.
Andrew Smith, who was born there. He and his siblings were born in Monterey. And I tell him, you lived here for almost 40 years. My roots, I've never lived here, and my roots go generations deep there. I mean, clear out to Big Sur,
Yes.
where the Smiths were,
Yes.
and Baja California, and that's
But possibly with Fremont, Captain Fremont, they
Nope.
came to Monterey in the 1848.
well,
Yeah.
the other branch that we haven't spoken about, the Smith branch. How do I begin this one? Thomas Smith was a sailor from New York. He was born in 1781, the son of George Smith and Mary Anna Marie Mott. Thomas was on a sailing ship that came around to Baja California in about 1808, and he jumped ship. He stayed there. The ship kept going, and the ship's captain wrote about it in a later log that Thomas Smith, a carpenter, had jumped ship and stayed there. He was then baptized and took the name of his godfather, who was Javier Aguilar. So there are some Smith descendants and some Aguilar descendants, but they're all basically Smiths. And who maybe changed their name back to Smith. But in the old baptismal records from Pablo Martinez has a thick book on Baja California. My mom, when I inherited her things, it said, big note, do not lend this book out, in her handwriting. And I kept that and added my own cover to it.
Mhm.
I was showing Carmel. She went through that book, which is probably 500 pages at least, underlined every Smith, every connection that could be to our branch of Smiths. So she would sit and just go through these books and say the information. And I've been able to expand a lot on her Smith research
Uh-huh,
too.
uh-huh.
But Thomas Smith and his family, he had about 9 children, were evacuated from Baja California in 1848. They came up on the Lexington, USS Lexington, to Monterey. For one thing, because he had been working as a translator for the U.S. government. he owned land in Mexico, but it could have been dangerous for he and his family to stay there because he had already worked for the U.S. government. So he was given the choice to evacuate with his family to Monterey, which he did. There is a book written by Nunes, N-U-N-I-S, about the Mexican-American War. And there's a page on there that's listed all the monies that were paid to the evacuees. And Thomas Smith, Juan Smith, Jose Maria Smith, who's my direct ancestor, and Juan Bautista Smith were all paid. And Thomas Smith was paid one of the bigger amounts. So then they're in the Monterey Census in 1850, 1851, 1852. And that's where my great-grandfather was born.
Ah.
Because Thomas Smith had, one of his sons was Jose Maria Smith.
Mhm.
Jose Maria, one of his children was Luisa Smith, who was my second great-grandmother. Here again, Luisa married a German whose name happened to be Schmidt. So we always knew we were Smith-Schmidt somehow, and I've
Yeah.
been able to delineate that down to today's world. But he was a German. They did not stay married. He started another family in Castroville, and she married a man by the name of Gibson and had one son. But the 4 children of Smith-Schmidt, all born in Monterey, but they all came to Colton and raised their families
Ah.
here. And that's the Belardes, the Espinosas, the Smiths and the Smiths.
Ah.
There were 2 boys and
Gee, what a
twin
wonderful
girls.
story. You know, you would never
So-
think that
Yeah.
the world operates in that fashion. You know, from leaving the ship in Mexico,
Mhm.
and then later on winding up in Monterey,
Yeah.
and then later on in Colton.
And why all the roads led to Colton, I don't know, because my dad came here from Arizona, and Wyatt Earp was in Tombstone
Yeah.
with my great-grandpa,
Yeah,
with my
right.
grandpa, not my great-grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have history in the ledgers in Tombstone.
Uh-huh.
So
Colton must have been
Galvez
big
history.
stuff then.
It was big
Colton
stuff.
was on the path to LA, I think.
Well, the
is-
railroad, Southern
The railroad.
Pacific,
Yeah.
and the
Railroad,
Santa
yeah.
Fe, the Santa Fe Railroad,
Mhm.
and the cement plant, lots of jobs.
Yes.
And then the PFE, lots of jobs.
And even the Mormons.
Mormons.
Well, they were here
Catholics,
for a short
Mormons,
time,
everything.
and then the orange groves, you know, Southern California
Yeah.
was a huge.
Some of my uncles, that's all they did was
Yeah.
pick oranges.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Tio Güero,
Tio Güero, and then Tio Ramon was.
Tio Ramon.
Tio Ramon.
Galvez.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned your dad coming from Arizona, and I was gonna ask because you concentrated on the Gaitan family.
Right.
You didn't really mention very much about the Galvez
Okay.
family.
My
Yeah.
dad
But
was
he was out.
named Guadalupe Galvez for his father, but he said Guadalupe was too difficult for people to say, so he just changed it to Walter.
Mm.
So he would get teased about Walterio. No.
No, Walterio.
So he ended up being Walter Guadalupe Galvez. He was born in May 1905 in Tombstone,
And he's a Dominguez also.
and well, he made sure that we knew. I got it.
Yeah.
It was Tombstone, Arizona territory, not Arizona, because Arizona didn't become a state until February 14th, 1912. Don't ask me why I remember these things, but it was driven into us. I was one of the few kids in grammar school who could write where my parents were born
Uh-huh.
and knew it, you know.
Right.
So, because they talked about family. And Daddy's father was married twice. The first wife had about 8 or 9 children, and then she died when her youngest was 2 years old, and she's buried in the Tombstone City Cemetery. Then he married Dolores Dominguez, who is our grandmother, and Dolores and Guadalupe are buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Riverside. But they had, I don't know, maybe 6, They had 5 children grow to adulthood.
Mhm.
Yeah, they had more than that. But
I know, there were
they didn't
17
all that.
altogether, but only 12 grew to adulthood. And my dad was number 11 of the 12
Both
of the
families.
combined overall family. And he was Mr. Social.
Yes.
He kept
He
the
treated
first one in touch with the last one's children,
and in his mind there were no half siblings.
No,
They
no
were all
halves.
brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were all related.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
They were
They
all
were all
related.
real
I have
brothers.
one cousin, he's in his 90s, and he still refers to us as half cousins, and it just grates.
Yeah.
It just grates.
Because Daddy never talked that
Yeah,
way.
never- yeah.
Well, talking about Daddy, your dad was very active in community activity.
Yeah.
They both were.
They both
equally
were.
They
It
both
was.
were,
It was
yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
your dad was one of the drivers of the Fiestas Patrias, along with Manuel Padilla and
Pete Lukey,
Pete Lukey,
Pascual
Pascual
Oliva.
Oliva,
That's what I mean.
and I don't know whether Tony
Manuel
Garcia-
Padilla.
Manuel
Manuel
Padilla.
Padilla, yeah.
But I think that was the group of people that were the, I guess they were the
Drivers.
community leaders of the of Colton.
Mhm.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Tell us, what activities did your dad participate in with this group of? Did they have an organization?
Well, that was the Latin American Civic Club.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then they were active in studying, who to vote for and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But there were also things that were happening in South Colton. Well, even before Mom and Dad were. Well, I remember as a kid too that there were tent shows that would be brought in, but I don't know who brought them. I don't know who the people were that arranged these big tent shows. Because the first time I saw the big comedian from Mexico, oh gosh,
Cantinflas?
Cantinflas, was in a big tent show in South Colton. And I think that was somewhere near Congress Street. Those tent shows, well, maybe they were not that far
There was a
down.
big swimming pool and bull ring out there.
Yeah,
and
I think.
Caldera.
It's a Caldera
South
pool,
Caldera.
yeah.
Caldera.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there was something big enough for these tent shows, and they had famous artists come in, but that was before my dad was really active in
Yeah.
that. I mean, that was the people
Earlier.
earlier. So anyway, see, there was a lot of activity in South Colton that didn't have anything to do with the northern part of town. It was really
Oh, of
odd.
course, of
Mhm.
course. We had the railroad was the dividing line.
Mhm.
Yeah, and part of it, and part of it was just the customs. People, families kind of enjoyed each other and stuff like that. And so, but there were a lot of things that went on.
But getting back to your dad,
Yes,
being actively involved in politics.
not really to run for anything. He would
Right.
never want to run
Yeah,
for
but
anything.
he
No.
would be a supporter, a
Yeah.
person that would encourage.
Yeah,
Both he and Mom. It was.
both he and
It was.
Mom.
You can't.
It was. Yeah.
Say one without the other
Ah,
because
okay.
they were together on it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they belonged to this club that you mentioned?
They were actually at some points president and vice president. I don't know
I think
when.
Daddy was president.
They
for a
held
while.
they held offices different times. It
Uh-huh.
was all shared. It wasn't just them. They were not leading it particularly. It was the group. It was led by a really active group. They were all equally
Uh-huh.
involved.
And this was during the late 40s and the early 50s?
Early 50s.
Early 50s
Yeah.
more.
Early
Oh,
50s.
early
Late
50s?
40s, we were dealing with war. Well, actually, everybody was getting back to normal.
Uh-huh.
Say from the end of war, 45, 46, and then people were trying to get back to normal, back to their families and stuff like that. And then I guess in the 50s was when it was more so.
Mhm.
Well, late 40s, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. Because I know the first councilman that was elected in Colton, Mexican councilman, Mexican-American councilman was
Pete Lukey. No.
Perez. It's
Perez.
Johnny Perez.
Ooh, I
Johnny
don't
Perez, the boxer.
He-
Johnny
When
Perez,
was
the
that?
boxer. In 1948.
Oh.
And then he was a councilman for 3 years, and he decided to resign, and he requested that Pete Lukey take his place. And then after that, Pete Lukey won another term.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the name of the organization that your parents belonged to, or were very active with? You mentioned the name of
Latin American Civic Club.
and some of the members were Pete Lukey.
Yeah.
Manuel
she named
Padilla.
him. Go ahead and name
¿Quién
him.
más?
I was remembering Manuel Padilla, Pete Luque Sr., Pascual Oliva, and Paul and Amelia Torres
Oh,
were
yeah.
active also.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
And they were very good friends of Mom and Daddy's.
There were other people. But
And
I
there,
can't remember.
I know there were others, but that's all that comes to mind
Uh-huh.
to me. And Pascual became a mayor. Didn't
Yeah,
he?
he was.
Yeah.
Yes, he
I think
became
he
a
was
mayor.
a mayor
And
at
Pete
some
was a
point.
councilman.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Part of the time I was gone too. You know,
Yeah, you were gone.
I lived in San Bernardino.
When I was in high school. So.
Mhm.
I lived when I was at Pato Hills. I was, totally there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not doing anything in Colton.
Well, I picked on you. What were you going to ask me?
Oh,
Well, I just remembered another name
Okay.
that came up, a Colton name, Rimbaugh. Carl
Oh, yes.
Rimbaugh was mayor, councilman and mayor.
Was he
Yeah.
related
And head
to
of
you?
Little League and
Yes.
head of Red Cross.
He was an
and
attorney too.
Yeah.
he was
He ran for office. And,
he was
oh,
my
very active.
grandma's second cousin. He would
Yeah.
be a second cousin.
So he's also related to the Awamasa clan, eh?
yes.
The Awayos. His
The
Oh,
Awayos.
grandmother was one of the sisters of Little.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And Frank usually reminds us of that connection. Frank Ohio.
Yeah.
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 Now tell us about you. You mentioned your husband and your two sons. Where did you go to school?
I went to the old Grant, the old Lincoln, the old Roosevelt, and the old Colton High, and,
Yeah.
and whether there's a wall left there or not,
And
I
Valley.
don't know.
You went to
I
Valley?
went to Valley College, and then when we moved to San Diego, I continued at Grossmont. Just got my AA. That's as
Uh-huh.
far as
And
I
when-
went.
When were you in high school?
52, September 52, and I graduated in June of 1956.
And during the period of being a yellow jacket.
Mhm.
Yes, I was.
You were a yellow jacket. What kind of activities were you involved in at Colton High School?
Oh, wow. I did 2 years of drill team. And I can tell you why, one of the good reasons.
Tell me.
If I came straight home, I found out as a freshman, if I came straight home from school, I had to make the tortillas for dinner. If I stayed for a meeting, the dough was already done. All I had to do was roll them out and cook them. 2 years of drill team, tortillas were done by the time I got home. And then I learned to drive, and by that time Mom was through making tortillas, so she'd send me to South Colton to get tortillas at one of the tortillerias, Martinez maybe, or
Martinez
one
or
and they'd
Hernandez?
wrap them in that butcher paper and easy to get into. So
Yes.
2 or 3 were gone by the time I got back to Colton. So nice and warm.
And tell
And-
them what you were into also. She was into another activity too. She was studying for modeling. She was
Oh, you
tall.
were.
She was always been tall, and she had to.
Statuesque.
Well, yes, and Mom always kind of drilled that we had to have good posture, so she had really, really.
If
good
you're
posture.
going to be tall, be
Yes.
tall.
Yes, because
If
Mom
you
was
start
tall.
slumping in pictures next to your friends, you're going to look like you're slumping in pictures next to your friends.
Right.
So give it all you've got.
Yes.
Pretend there's a balloon tied to the top of your head and
Uh-huh.
and walk straight and be proud of who you are.
Right.
Well, that's really
Always.
hard for a 13, 14-year-old girl. Until one day, like I said, I learned to dance at these anniversary parties that they had in Box Canyon with the Espinosa clan from Riverside.
And how did we learn to dance?
Well, birthdays and
with-
anniversaries
yes.
with Daddy.
No, with the
Um,
mop and a broom. Mama would drill us on dancing
Oh,
because
you,
she said,
she did.
all. I thought it was you too. Maybe the two older one then, because she
I had a
said
mop.
you'll be dating in a few years, so you're going to learn how to dance. One with the mop and one with Mom, and the other one with the broom. I thought you were
You and
also
Philip.
in that.
Yeah.
You didn't get to learn that. way?
I was playing jacks.
Oh,
I was riding my bike.
I thought it was the three of us.
No.
Anyway,
I learned to dance with my daddy at stumbling over, poor guy, at these dances, at anniversaries, birthdays, whatever. They said it's Saturday night, let's have a party. So I always went, with them,
We always did.
and I'd dance with my dad. Well, here I'm very self-conscious because I'm tall. I wasn't even as tall as I am now, but at that time it was unusual. So one day I was out there dancing, And everyone, all the men and women the women used to sit around
Around
the room.
Right.
Yeah.
And they sit there and they watch and they talk. And I noticed I was being stared at. I was very self-conscious and didn't like to be stared at, but I knew it was happening. So I went back, and my dad took me back to my seat, and I sat down next to Mom, and I said, Mom, those women were staring at me. And she said, which ones? And she taught us never to point. So she said, which ones? And I, without looking at them, I said, oh, the one in the green, and the one in the blue, and the one in the red. And she says, okay. We're in Riverside, right? My dad's old stomping grounds. She says, your daddy dated the one in the red. He was engaged to the one in the green, and then he was engaged to the one in the blue. So I go, oh, really? So I'd just be as tall and try to exude as much beauty as I could from this 13-year-old face. You know? And that was part of it. You know, if you're going to be tall, be tall.
Mom was tall too herself.
Mom
She
was
knew what it was like.
5'7.5", so she was very aware.
Uh-huh.
So for her to be a teenager in the 20s, late 20s, was tough. So she was supportive.
Very, very supportive.
Very supportive.
Besides the drill team, what else were you involved
Oh,
in?
Mexican Youth Club.
Tell me about the Mexican Youth Club. What was that?
Well, all I remember is dress-up day. They had meetings, but it was like social, when's our next dance? We had, I think, a couple of dances a year, and
Uh-huh.
you probably know Bobby Velasquez.
Oh, yeah.
And he had the band
Yes.
that played. And
Uh-huh.
in fact, he and his 9-piece band played for my wedding in 1959. So I was in journalism. I was lucky enough to have the same teacher she had, C.D. Beeson,
Uh-huh.
and she had me in accelerated sophomore English, and then I went into journalism, the Pepper Bow, where she found out my talent was proofreading. So she said, nothing gets printed without Carol looking at it last. So I was always head copy reader, and which I later thought was a curse, because I can look at a blimp and find the typo in it, you
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
but I was told by a writer, a proponent of the English language in San Diego, he said, it is a curse, but it's a gift, and you just have to live with it and learn when to use it, when not to. But then I was on, she hand chose her yearbook staff. So she put me on the yearbook staff for my senior year, and I was in there 1 week, and I came home and I said, Mom, I just don't want to do it. Can you write a note for me to get out? And I had already taken all the business classes I needed. I knew I had to work. I couldn't go straight into college.
And we weren't allowed to go to waitressing, neither of
Yeah,
us.
no. I worked in Tacotia for 2 days, and they fired me because I was putting too much cheese on the tacos. So, but that's the way I like them. So there went that job. But other than babysitting, I hadn't worked. So I prepared. She said, you can come out of high school with, not talents, skills. So she said, you have to be prepared no matter what. If you get married, what happens if something happens to your husband? You have to be able to take care of yourself. So she was very big on that, on being able to, because she went to school later. She got her high school diploma. And
After the twins were born.
after the
yeah,
twins
after
were
my
born, yeah,
brothers
she
were
went
born.
back and she worked at Norton Air Base and
Yeah.
retired from there. So,
Yes.
but she said, come out of high school with skills. Don't depend on anyone else to take care of you.
Mhm.
So instead of yearbook, I took a second year of shorthand, and I had, like all the typing, all the business classes I needed. So consequently, I took the state test my senior year in June, and much to my shorthand teacher's surprise, I came out number one on the list. He'd just roll his eyes at me, because I didn't like to do homework.
Uh-huh.
So, which consisted in shorthand of copying out of a book.
Uh-huh.
I thought, no, dictate to me,
Yeah.
let me hear the spoken
That's-
word.
That's the good part.
And so from that, they interviewed, so that was in June. So then the state was hiring had an opening for junior steno. And they took the top 3 off the list, and they interviewed me. And while they were interviewing me in the employment office on 5th and Mountain View, a man walked out of the disability, and I later found out it was a disability insurance office. He walked down the hall, he stopped, came back, I remember seeing him, came back to the doorway and stood there, and then walked over and he said, "Are you interviewing for a job?" And I said yes, and the woman told him it was a junior steno job. He said, "Would you like to work in this building?" I went, "Sure, I'd work anywhere." And he said, "Okay, come with me," and I was hired like that. So I graduated from high school on a Thursday night and started working Monday morning for the state, and worked there for 15 months, and then decided, okay, now I have money, now I need to go to junior college. And my mom was fully supportive. She said, okay. So I quit, and in September of '57, I went to Valley College. And but a couple of months later, I also met the man who I was to marry.
Uh-huh.
So I got in 1 year of junior college there, and then finished up I took some classes in Long Beach and then finished up in San Diego. Because by this time my son was attending UCLA. And I told myself, okay, I can't get my degree before he does, because I'm still raising David. I had an excuse for everything. But I was determined to get my 2-year degree before he finished his 2nd year. So that was my goal, and that's what I did. And that was fine with me. That's all I want. I always just really wanted to have a home and children. I would work and I'd see these career women and they'd be complaining about their kids, and I thought, I'll never do that. I'll stay home first. So that's me.
So you stayed home and are doing the family genealogy.
Now I'm busier than I thought. No,
That's a
gosh.
job.
But I've worked through the years.
Right.
I didn't work for about 15 years, and then I went back part-time.
Yeah.
The manager of the disability insurance office saw us downtown one Monday night, and he said, "Are you working?" And I said, "No." He said, "Do you want to work?" And I said, "No, maybe 4 hours a day." He said, okay. He called me the next day, and they made a 4-hour position for me so I could come back. So if you leave with a good reputation, they remember. And,
So things worked out very well for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in ensuing years, I worked for a couple of different school districts in San Diego. Part-time always. So.
You know, many of the people that we interviewed, so far we've interviewed, you're number 45,
Yeah.
and the theme that comes out of growing up in Colton is that north of the railroad tracks, that Mexicans were not allowed to go back and forth or participate in the theater or the plunge or things like that. Do you remember any of those incidents?
Yeah, and as I was waiting for my eye appointment the other day, I had to wait because they were running late. So I wrote something, and let me see if I can read my scribbles, because I was sitting in. Well, let me back up to
Okay.
Grant School. We all went to Grant School. We walked across town when we lived in South Colton. She had to get permission because it was a long walk and she didn't drive, and my dad was working. So Grant School was a long walk across 2 sets of railroad tracks.
Where did you live in South Colton?
South Colton,
East End.
Las Palomas, East
Oh,
End.
East
East
End
End
Street,
Street,
next to
okay.
the
Yeah.
store.
It is a long walk.
Yes, I was in 4th and 5th grades then, and we later moved north, and no problem moving there either. But Grant School was across town, and we went to, it was a smaller school. They had 2 grades to each classroom, and teachers who had been there a long time, and the principal was a wonderful
Yes.
superwoman,
Mrs. Gray.
and she knew how to handle our brother. But anyway, who was very smart, very, very
what was her
bright.
name?
Philip.
Philip.
No, I know Philip, but that.
Oh,
the
Mrs.
principal-
Gray, was
Galvez.
it?
No,
Mrs.
what was her name? Oh, gosh.
I can see her.
No, Mr. Gray was a teacher
Mr. Gray.
in Roosevelt School.
Oh,
Mrs.
But anyway,
yeah.
this is back to the school thing. And so with 2 grades in each room, Mom figured there's faster learning there. Because she knew that we were all active, our brains were active and curious and everything. So she had to watch for that. By junior high, we lived on the north side. There was no problem in our neighborhoods of any discrimination. We had no problem buying a house, no problem at all. And
where-
our last name was Galvez, which is, a
Yeah.
Mexican last name.
Where was the house that you bought? Where was it
On
located?
F Street,
East
Okay,
F.
okay.
East F.
465.
Okay.
West F.
Oh, anyway, F Street, whatever, that's
By-
all.
by the school.
Okay, we had no discrimination, and we did not expect any, nor did we behave as if there were any. We did not expect any, and nobody, and we all spoke clear, no accent English anyway, being here for generations, and our Spanish was clear. We were not allowed to use slang in Spanish or English, and we were not allowed to combine the two into a Spanglish. That was rules in our house. Okay. And we had pride in our ethnicity, and we never denied it in our family at all. I can't say that for all our relatives, though. But anyway, Mom did have
Footnote.
separation memories of Colton when she lived there, though. And she said during parts of her childhood, and they were namely, and these are the only ones that I remember that she named, were the Colton Plunge, because you could not go until, they,
The date
in
of
her
choice.
age group, there. She was born in 1915. They could not go until the day before the cleaning of the plunge. Okay. And then the Hub City Movie Theater. And the other one, the New Colton Theater, there was no problem there. We had no problem when
No.
we were growing up, though, with any of that, the plunge or the movies. People were still saying that there was a problem because they were still abiding by it in their own heads.
Uh-huh.
But anybody could go anywhere in those places at the time. But it took a while for people to realize that. Okay. And the schools were mostly separated by main busy streets. Railroad tracks, dangerous for youngsters to cross. We had no problem getting permission from the superintendent of schools to transfer to the Grant School and stuff when we moved from LA. And the other thing was about the school. Los Angeles schools, where I was going, and I think my brother had started school then too, the system was very good there at the time. This is before war, before World War II. There were 2 teachers to each classroom, and they had semesters. You could promote from one semester to another, into another grade even. But Mom was pretty adamant about keeping in our age group. So she always helped teach anyway. In our house, there was always teaching going on. So that was one of the reasons for wanting to go to the schools on the north side, because we had come in from LA, where it was very good schools. I don't know what they're doing now. But our parents wanted the same type of education as we were getting there. And that was my little cogitation while I was waiting. Yes.
Can I add the reason I told you? I heard that she says, I didn't want you to go to school in South Colton because they would spend the first year teaching you English.
Oh, that's right.
And you already knew English.
Yes.
Okay.
And when you speak English, you're going to speak it well.
Yes.
You're not, as she said, not
Yeah.
do slang.
Well, our parents were
So-
accent-free too, so.
Yeah, they didn't.
All they had was a
and yet they
California
just switched
accent.
back and forth.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
When Mom worked for the employment,
yeah.
like I said, she worked for Norton later, and then she worked for the employment
The
office.
state,
She did some counseling,
yeah.
but she also did the radio announcements. in Spanish on the Mexican radio station.
Okay.
And one time I was sitting in the
Both
Salazar,
parents kept up that
Oh,
Spanish
yeah.
and English. Yeah.
in the Salazar backyard with my husband's grandpa, Abundio, who would sit at the picnic table in the backyard taking apart radios and transistors, and he always had the Mexican radio station on. And I sat back there with him, and everyone said, "Oh, you never speak to Grandpa in English. It's always, you have to speak Spanish to Grandpa." Here I come in, I'm the only daughter-in-law, and I would sit back there and speak to Grandpa the way I spoke with my tias and tios. He'd talk to me in Spanish, I'd talk to him in English, and we had great conversations going. Well, then one time I was sitting back there talking with him, and my mom's voice came on. I said, "That's my mother." And he said, "What?" Now, he had visited with my mom. He had spoken Spanish with my mom, but hearing her on the radio was a whole different. It was like she was a movie star. So I said, "No, it's not." Oh, and he said in Spanish that she speaks Spanish. I said, "Grandpa, you've talked to her," and but she kept it up. She counseled people on jobs and forms, and I think it was a very, very difficult time for her when she retired. She really missed the interaction with other people.
Well, it seems
So-
that she was at the cutting edge of women's lib.
She,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, her mom was a good example.
Yeah, Grandma was
Grandma was a
the
working
liver.
mom. I
Yeah,
mean,
she had
you
to
know.
work.
Yeah, she was a short order
She
cook.
and
you
ran
before they had
boarding
the store.
houses
Yeah,
and
she, you
had
know,
to-
her mom were always,
Yeah.
her mom always worked
Yeah.
too, so,
Yeah.
and had a tough hand on raising the family too, so, you know,
Yeah,
they were
and
strong
Grandma.
women.
And
Yes.
we heard she could cuss like a sailor.
Oh,
Grandma-
that's even
That's my
better.
grandmother.
That's even better.
Oh, you want me to quote something?
No,
Do you have the camera off, I hope?
Go ahead,
Oh.
you start.
Well, we lived on the corner of Fairview and Colton Avenue, and of course the bus stopped there. And when Grandma had been off shopping in San Bernardino, and the bus stopped there, and I happened to be out in the front yard, and I saw somebody stepping down the steps from the bus, and I said, "Oh, Grandma!" And I yelled really loud, "Grandma's here! Grandma's here!" Because I didn't want to run in and yell. I just said, "Grandma's here." And thinking Mom would hear that from inside, and my grandma heard it from stepping down off the bus, and she said, "Shut up, Lolita, you sound like a goddamn peacock." And the whole bus drove off with people,
And that was across Colton Avenue.
yeah, yes, across the divided Colton Avenue. But I always laughed. My grandmother cussed, but it was funny.
Funny. It's
She
always
cussed
funny.
in a funny, loving way. That's what it was.
Nobody ever got angry with her.
No, she was a funny cusser.
Listen, we've been at this for a little over an hour.
Oh my goodness.
And which is great. But let me ask you another question. In looking back and growing up in Colton, what are some of the wonderful or best memories that you remember about growing up in Colton?
The plunge.
Tell me about the
The
plunge.
natural artesian warm water plunge.
Uh,
And we lived down the street, and I could walk by myself down Colton Avenue, stop and get a 5-cent root beer on the way home, and I had I think a dime for the locker, or we'd just go watch the swim meets. Just walk back down the street and watch the swim meets that were on in the park, and then my little brothers started playing Little League baseball, so we'd go back there and watch their baseball games. And, but the plunge and
The movie
the
house.
beautiful downtown we used to have.
Oh, yes, yes.
All
yes.
the old buildings
Yes,
that
yes, yes, yes.
when I go to towns like Petaluma or some of the other towns that have not torn down the buildings, I go to Colton would be even prettier.
Yes, yes, yes.
So,
I go to Santa Paula and I
Oh,
have the
yeah.
same thoughts.
yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Dolores?
Well,
Memorable memory.
I can remember not liking Colton when we first moved from LA because part of our entertainment in Los Angeles was my dad taking us to the airport to watch the airplanes land and take off. That was a big deal then. There was none of that in Colton, but it took probably a while for me to get used to the trains being so near, the trains, but we did move when the war hit, and I remember one of my happy things was waving to the troops as the trains went by.
Okay.
And to me, it was really neat to have people waving back from those trains and knowing that they were going to be training for war. And I remember that so clearly that I thought, oh, we're lucky we can see these guys before they have to go, before they're training even, a lot of them. And then you saw them being transported from the different bases after they were in uniforms and stuff. So that was a memory that was, to me, I began to like Colton when I saw there was more activity than just missing the airport. Yeah, and see, in LA there was the schools were so good. I was already a performer in things in the kindergarten. I was already singing in kindergarten. So I missed that a lot. And then also in Colton there were free dance lessons at the parks. Everything was like there, and you didn't have to pay any extra. It was right off of depression,
Yeah, right.
So there were things. So Colton took a little getting used to for me, but then I found out how nice everybody was and all the family stuff that went on. You soon get used to that.
Yeah.
Because you feel a lot of love, and that's what Colton was very loving then. Even on in through high school then. Yeah.
Well, I would normally end my interview with that question, but let me pose another question. That would be, I'm asking both of you, did I forget anything, or did you remember anything that we should cover in this interview?
You got another 3 hours?
She mentioned the trains. When we lived on Colton Avenue, we lived on Little Colton Avenue because there was like the boulevard that went to the Orange Show, and then the tracks, and then a smaller access street, and that's where we were. And at the end of the war, the troop trains would come by, and they were all going home.
Yes.
And the soldiers were just hanging out of the windows. We would hear the train, and we'd run out to the front yard. We had a deep front yard, and we'd just wave and wave and wave until the last car went by. And I have that memory of being a little part of their smiles coming home type things.
Yeah.
And you, Dolores, anything that came up during our interview?
Oh my goodness. Oh, you talked about separation problems. I remember one problem. I think the problem that people bring up in the housing was when the tracts were starting to be built after all this war thing, and I think it was after the Korean thing though, when they built this track up in the northern part, and there was one of my classmates had applied to buy one of those new tract homes, and they were going to try the Hispanic, his last name was Alvarez, right? And they were starting to make noises like they were going to refuse to take his down payment. He was working, he worked in Riverside, he had a lovely wife and everything, and they had children. And I remember that people like McIntosh, who was principal of the high school, and several higher ups in the city gathered together and told that builder what was what. And Alvarez got his home there. But it took city people to tell that builder back off. And so there was help for anybody who had any problem with it and who didn't want to accept that. So because the city itself was integrated. And there were already people living in the north and south and east and west.
Yeah, what year was that, Dolores?
That had to be, we graduated in 51.
Okay.
So it had to be in the middle 50s. See, when I graduated, I think when I was a junior and senior, they started taking guys for the Korean thing.
Mm-hmm.
So after that was done, they came back. And I remember Alvarez had been in the military, I think Army, but I'm not sure. And so it was after that, and that, you know, working a while, you have a down payment money. And so it was in the middle 50s probably.
Okay.
Yeah. But see, if people got the hair up on their neck and said, okay, I'm going to fight this,
Defensive,
there were
yeah.
people that helped them fight it. And so that was cleared up very fast.
Okay.
So there was not that separation as much as people like to remember.
Uh-huh.
And I'm here to say it was better than that.
See, I forgot those things. I'm delighted that I asked that question.
Yeah.
So then there's a time I come home from school. I was about maybe 1955 or so, or maybe a junior, or maybe a sophomore before that. And I was home from school, and Daddy came walking in the back door. It could have been a weekend, I don't know. And he announced in the kitchen, because we all use the back door to the kitchen. He says, we're going to have to move. And we all went, what? You know, Mama said, why? And he says, well, they're Mexicans moving in next door. And that was just a standing joke. And they were just wonderful people from New Mexico who had moved in, and she still lives there and still remembers our
Yeah.
family. But
They were really fun neighbors.
But Daddy just had fun with that. So we got to move.
Oh, he used to
Yeah.
kid about people that would want to steal our nopal plants. You
Oh,
know,
yeah,
our tender nopales that were
Yes,
growing.
yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
He always had no fun.
Yeah.
And tunas, did he have tunas? The
Yeah, but I
pretty
don't remember. She
Yeah.
probably ate them. I didn't.
No, I didn't like them, but Daddy liked them. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what are now we're talking about foods and chorizos?
Chorizo, yeah.
Yeah.
It was all, and of course, they had their favorite stores to buy their favorite things that didn't have so much fat in them, you know,
Uh-huh.
because some people that made those sausages or even tortillas or whatever, they, you know.
Well, somebody asked Mama one time they were going to eat there, and he said, "Are we having Mexican food?" And she said, "Well, anything I cook is Mexican food."
So when I took nutrition classes, in home ec, in high school, we had home ec, right?
Mhm.
So my menus always had tortillas and everything, and the teacher would say something about bread, and I'd say, that's our bread, that's our bread. So I was proud to say what we like to eat. And I would even tell teacher, my dad calls beans, he would say, eat your strawberries, you know. And so they had to accept what we wrote in class.
Uh-huh.
So I said, that's our menu, that's what I want.
We were always taught
no,
to be proud of who we were,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
and our roots. I think
Yeah.
that's why Mama would bring it all forward
Yeah.
to this day, and say, "This is who you are," and that's the way I look on the genealogy.
Uh-huh.
This is
And also she would level the important people field, because she would say, oh, see, McIntosh is your school principal, right? High school principal? Yeah. She said, he was the football coach when I was in high school. You know, go, okay. You know, when you're here a long time, you know, you see people growing.
Yes, 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 yes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Well, listen, thank you so much for
for letting us ramble on.
for being with us this afternoon. It was just a great interview, and I'm delighted that I finally found out not only a wonderful background of your family from Alamanza,
Mhm.
but also of you being actively involved in the arts.
oh, yes.
And
I still am.
May I make a correction?
Okay.
My sister, contrary to many rumors in Colton, was never in the Ramona pageant.
Oh, yes. Never.
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 Didn't even want to be, did you?
No.
No.
It was outdoors.
But a lot of people said, "Oh yeah, your sister was in the Ramona pageant." And I said, "No, she
No,
wasn't."
it was
Oh.
Padua Hills Theater, but they had it wrong.
Yeah, they didn't know.
Uh-huh.
But Padua Hills Theater, I was a salaried worker.
Uh-huh.
I was a salaried player, worker, whatever you call it.
Uh-huh.
And that was a big difference. In fact, they had to go higher than what I was getting at Harris Company, which wasn't the best pay. But they started me at more money than I was getting at Harris Company doing advertising. So that was, and
So
that
that was a good move for you.
So she switched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I switched, and the people in advertising were very angry because I left just before the big Christmas push of advertising. And they said, "Don't ever come back." And I said, "Thank you, I never will."
And that was in 1950 or so, was it? No, early 50s, early 50s.
I can't
Early
remember what
50s.
year. 50,
And I
yeah,
didn't take
53 maybe.
Yeah.
I didn't take any music and no dancing, because how can you follow that?
No, see, I didn't.
People say,
I
"Oh, do
thought-
you sing too?" And I
I
went,
thought that was
No.
sad that she didn't, because she has a good voice. It's a deeper voice than mine, but she could have.
"We blend. If we sing together, we blend." But no, people will ask, and go now.
But she grew taller and I grew short.
But she had all the kids, and I had one.
I was the practice one. Is that off? Oh, well, anyway. I'm the runt of the litter. I won't say it the other way.
Well, listen,
What?
Dolores.
I have a lot of grandkids.
How
I
many
forgot to
grandkids do
mention
you
all my
have?
grandkids.
How many do you have?
A lot.
9 natural and then many more that are.
Yeah, I have several from a second marriage, but also I have 9 of my own grandkids and 4 great grands, 3 of Angela's, and 5 great grands, and another one coming in June. So
Congratulations.
I have multiplied many times.
Oh,
do any of them sing or dance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, her
yes.
granddaughter in
Um,
San Luis Obispo sings.
My son Vince was a performer when he died, and he was a singer, performer. He was in California Boys Choir and got really good training. And I remember his middle school teacher complaining when he left. Were you teaching there then, Mr. Acosta? When Vince was in middle
No,
school?
he said-
In Grand Terrace. His teacher said, "Oh, if he performs in Los Angeles with this California Boys Choir, he won't want to perform with his peers." And I looked her straight in the face and I said, "His peers are the kids who want to sing and dance and perform. Those are his peers. And he will be performing in many languages and learning operatic stuff, everyday stuff, and he will be learning stage
So,
presence, which he loves."
It was good training. Dolores,
Yeah.
I'm going to pick on you again.
Uh-oh.
Dolores, can we end this interview with a song that you sang before? Can you remember any of the songs that come to mind back then?
One that you like to hear her sing.
Cuando escuchan
Hello.
este vals.
What?
Cuando escuchan este vals.
Oh my God. You're pulling a surprise on me.
I am.
I don't sing
know I
alone.
am.
I don't
am.
sing alone much. I sing in
I'll join you. I'll
3
join you.
chorales,
Sister is there.
and I don't do any soloing.
He'll sing with you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Cuando escuchas. Or
She sang at both my weddings.
Cuando escuches este vals, haz un recuerdo. No, sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
I've been talking and I'm not warmed up. Sorry. I can't sing.
How about
on
Las
cue.
Mañanitas? Carmel would join you.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I only
Come
know
on.
part of it.
I will.
Come on,
I
Carmel.
will.
Okay, we'll all sing Las
Yeah.
Mañanitas.
Right here, close.
Is the
Son las
mañanitas que cantaba el rey David. Hoy por ser el día de tu santo, te las cantamos a ti.
Despierta, mi bien, despierta, mira que ya amaneció. Y a los pajarillos cantan, la luna ya se metió. Thank you very much.
Linda está la mañana en que vengo a saludarte. Venimos todos con gusto y placer a felicitarte. Ya viene amaneciendo, ya la luz del día nos dio. Levántate, vida mía, mi Mira que ya amaneció. Bum, ba-da-da-da-dum, bum, bum.
Thank you very much, thank you. Yes, sir.
You know, we have not addressed the topic of mixed marriages, and I wonder if these girls might be appropriate interviewees to address that
Okay,
with the Hispanic community.
okay, okay.
Mixed
Do we have tape?
How far back would you want us to go?
We're at
There have been
12
mixes
right
way
now.
back.
You
Okay.
all.
Is that the
Wow.
limit?
No, but what's the limit?
There are
The rest of the
23 minutes.
community.
How many minutes?
23.
Okay, okay, okay.
23
Lily,
minutes.
Lily, pose your question again because we have 20
Well,
minutes.
just go ahead and ask it.
No, go ahead. No, no, we're not recording yet.
Yes, we are. I
Oh,
did-
We are recording.
Come on.
Perhaps it would be appropriate for these girls to address the topic of mixed marriages in our community.
Mixed with what?
Men and women?
Mixed in the sense of ethnicities mixing.
Well, a lot of people are Latino, have Latino blood, but they don't know it. Some of it is kept secret. We found out in some of our
Mhm.
relatives.
Oh, they
Wait.
didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've been kind of surprised at that because we've been raised kind of proud.
Uh-huh.
We both married men of Mexican descent,
Yeah.
and mine was probably more in the barrio than yours.
No, they lived in
Gilbert
Barrio too.
spoke, yeah, but Phil didn't speak
Oh,
Spanish.
he was a baby in
Anglicized,
his family.
yeah. And Gil was raised with 5 sisters, my husband. But people thought we were mixed because he was darker than I was. And there were people I went to school with that didn't realize I was of Mexican descent.
Yeah. But we are mixed.
And we are. And we were at an anniversary, at Katie and Joe Ohio's anniversary party one time. And my fair skinned mother was sitting there, and some women were speaking in Spanish behind her.
Yeah.
And they spoke about Vicky's son and his gringa wife. And my mother turned around and told him in Spanish that I am, that's her daughter, and I am of Mexican descent.
Uh-huh.
But people went just by looks.
Yeah.
And, but I knew of some cases where the Mexican girl married an Anglo, and they were always self-conscious of it, even later into the 60s.
Uh-huh.
So that was too bad.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because we had, our great grandpa was a smith. And our great uncles and aunts, they
All
were, you know,
Smiths.
and so we couldn't be ashamed of a Smith relative. I mean, they were mixed blood also.
Uh-huh.
They were all mixed.
They were all mixed.
Yeah.
We have, well, who did the genome study? She sent to, we have a little, everybody has a little bit of a lot of bloods.
We all start in Asia, right?
Yeah.
Or Africa,
Yeah.
right? And then
She-
go on from there. And
They sent for our genome study. It was pretty interesting, but then, you know, it goes into the back of, the back files.
Centuries.
yeah.
But
Well, I mean, to keep it in our heads, it's not running around every day either,
Yeah.
you know. Everybody's a big mix.
we didn't have that. Later, we both married Anglo men, but sometimes he needs some Latin blood. So he doesn't
Well,
dance. Where did I
you
go
know,
wrong?
I'm glad you asked that, Lily, because in my family, Grandpa was from Mexico, a very, very kind of conservative person, and he was very angry when his granddaughter, you know, we had Norton Air Force Base,
Mhm.
and they had the dances, and then they met boys from all over the country.
Right.
And then they brought them home. And when my grandfather saw a gringo with his granddaughter, ooh, it must enojado.
We didn't have
Mhm.
any of that.
Must say,
We were
oh.
already mixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, and now we look at contemporary California.
Yeah.
In contemporary California, especially Southern California, everybody goes to school together.
Mhm.
Everybody gets acquainted with each other. And now everybody is, you know, dating somebody from whoever it is. And then they finally get married. And So I guess you were ahead of the game back then because
Yeah.
that's what's happening in contemporary California, Southern California.
No, because our ancestors were ahead of the game.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But I know some families where the parents steered their daughters towards Anglo boys. They didn't want them to marry a Mexican American, and I always thought that was kind of sad that they were going to lose down the generations. I could already see that they were going to lose things, but they were so proud of their other name and
Was it
I thought, we go home and tell Mom, and she's
was it because of economic reasons? Or?
No, it's just to look good in front of their friends, I think. Really, there was a lot of that
We never know
social.
reasons.
No, but I knew some people who did.
Mhm.
They wouldn't date. Oh no, I don't date Mexican boys.
Mm,
That thing. I said, boy, I do.
yeah.
Tall ones though. Yeah, and we met at a.
Yeah, for my
at the
sister,
deli-
they had to be tall.
They had to be tall because I wore heels. In fact, that's what my husband told me later after we were married. He was telling somebody, he says, yeah, I fell in love with Carol because she was the first Mexican girl I could dance with cheek to cheek. And I liked it. So I kept asking her to dance. And he did. And we danced all night. We danced forevermore afterwards.
Good thing Mom taught us to dance. Mom and Dad taught
Yeah.
us to dance.
And he did. He could just, you could tell he really enjoyed holding me, and that's what he said. He says, I can hold you this close in public.
Well,
And
in our
that was a good
family-
thing about dancing.
In our family, there's all kinds. There are all kinds of races now in our whole family, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And nobody
Yeah.
ousted anybody on that. So no, and nobody ousted Vinny when he came out as being being homosexual. Nobody ousted Vinny in the family either. It's all. We are a mix mash of everything, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is welcome because we live in a country where everybody is welcome.
Mhm.
So why not be part of that country's credo?
And then many people say that you don't marry a person from an ethnic group. You marry a person because that person is a person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
If you're shopping right.
I don't know. I don't know if you
if
could
you're
ever
smart enough.
find a pure anything. There's nobody is pure any one thing.
Well, the old Mexican saying, the old Mexican dish, we're a product of a capirotada. Right? We're a product of a capirotada.
Yeah.
Well, with that, again,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you so much for being with us
Thank
this
you
afternoon.
for giving us this time to,
Thoroughly enjoy our,
Oh,
our
thank you.
interview.
Yes.
and good luck with your.
We do this.
Stories.
No, I want to say right now, we do this in Mom and Dad's memory. They were
Yes.
both interested in family histories, and the backward and forward. They were
Uh-huh.
both interested totally, and they were both interested in relatives keeping in touch with each other too, and we try to do that.
They say my dad was the social director and my mother was the
Historian.
glue that held it all together.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and they all acknowledge that.
Yep.
The historian.
Yep.
So,
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
we're just I told Vic